Good evening and welcome to the Ombudsman program. My name is Diane Wellborn. I am the Ombudsman and I'm going to be your host for this evening's program. I'm really thrilled this evening to be visited by Bart Kincaid as a guest on the program, and our topic tonight is how to prevent our seniors, the elderly in our community, from becoming victims of scams and also of financial exploitation. So Bart Kincaid is the IT director for the Sheriff's Office, and so he works in the IT area, and I'm looking forward to getting our questions answered and hearing his presentation about what steps we can take to protect ourselves and our seniors from all of these scams and threats. Thank you very much for joining me on the program tonight.
No problem, Diane. I'm glad to be here.
Well, I'm really glad to have you. So let's start right off the top. We have a number of slides that we're going to show people tonight, and this is a call-in show, and the number will be shown on the screen, but we want to get through the wonderful amount of information that you've brought. So we're going to start tonight with slide 1, which introduces everyone to the mission of the Sheriff's Office here in Montgomery County, and it is up. So please, go ahead.
The Montgomery County Sheriff's Office strives to be responsive to the community's safety needs, to reduce fear, and make Montgomery County a safe place to live and work in the most cost-efficient way possible.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And I think that we all would agree that it's always better to be able to prevent crime, isn't it, rather than to have to chase down things afterwards. So we want to stress a lot on prevention here tonight.
Absolutely. This more than anything, we have to stress prevention because it's so difficult to prosecute oftentimes. Right. So I think we'll skip over to slide 3, please, for the folks that are helping us bring the slides up. And this is where we're talking about the Regional Dispatch Center, and we will provide that number for people later in the program. Why don't you talk us through this slide, please? Okay, so at the Regional Dispatch Center, which serves several communities in Montgomery County. That's where someone would call in and complain of something that has happened to them. So how we track that is tracked by what we call fraud, and that encompasses everything we're going to talk about tonight. If someone were to call and say their credit card was stolen or that they think that they were a victim of identity theft, it's probably going to be put into the system by fraud. So what you'll see by these numbers is that from 2013 to 2015, the calls we receive have risen steadily.
I think we'd like to see slide 3 again, please. That would be great. So the viewers can see where we are. Perfect. Go ahead.
Okay, so what we're projected right now in 2016, it does appear that it's going to drop off, but that can often be misleading simply because of tax season or we don't know what's going to come with different seasons. So sometimes those numbers can jump. But the first quarter projections for 2016, it does appear the numbers are down. However, the numbers are still alarming. We're averaging 230 to 280 calls per month dealing with fraud. So that's in general. That doesn't necessarily mean that it is just elder fraud, but seniors are a very large target for fraud in general, simply because of some of the things we're going to talk about that make them a little more vulnerable to it.
Okay, very good. Thank you for that. We do hope that it goes down. Let's then look at the next slide, the quick facts from the TrueLink report. And Bart will let us tell you what this slide is stressing for us.
Yes. So what TrueLink is it's a financial. TrueLink is an organization that protects and looks after the financial well-being of adults with disabilities, seniors, and vulnerable individuals. They do a report every year. And they try to track some of the numbers. So the most recent report, which was done in 2015, revealed some startling figures. Previously, they were looking at elder fraud to be about $3 billion a year of a financial impact on our seniors
Nationwide.
nationwide. Although that number alone is enough to alarm you, it was nowhere near what we were really facing. And we were about 12 times higher than that in actuality, and that's almost $36.5 billion annually that they estimate is lost to fraud by our seniors. So over a given 5-year period, we're looking at a third of our seniors or more being targeted or being victims. So and we can break that 37 billion down. We're going to get into it a little bit here, but we'll talk a little bit about it now. But then I'm going to talk a little more about it on the next slide. 17 billion just to financial exploitation. 12 billion, almost 13 billion is attributed to illegal activity or criminal activity, and then another 6.5 billion just to what they call caregiver abuse or deceit or theft from a trusted person. So when you look at those numbers, I don't want to jump too far ahead here, but we'll talk a little bit more about that in a couple slides.
Well, I think that slide there from TrueLink really points out the magnitude of the problem. And I think that has alerted those of us that work with seniors and certainly in law enforcement just all across the country that it is an enormous problem that we need to help with.
And one thing I will say about those numbers, that's what's accounted for. That's not accounting for how much of this fraud or these scams are successfully exploited that go unaccounted for.
Unreported and uncounted, right. Okay, let's go to the next slide about the warning signs.
Yes.
And so this is where we can start to hope people will take note here about what those are so that they can either help themselves or their loved ones.
Right. So the perception might be that someone who's very old or maybe suffering from dementia, you think of someone who's all alone and very, very weak, so to speak, would be the biggest target. But that's not necessarily the case. And what they do is, what you have to look at is risk equals vulnerability plus exposure. So if you have a lot of money and you're outgoing and you're out and still active, or as many seniors are, and you're out spending your money, you're actually probably a bigger target than someone who's just suffering from dementia or some, that old perception that they're easy targets because they're suffering from dementia or something like that. It's not true. The other thing to be concerned with is, small losses are evidence of vulnerability, which means that if you would happen to notice like a $20 loss, chances are that person's very susceptible to fall victim to a much bigger scam.
Okay.
So, as a result of all this, another alarming figure is an estimated 954,000 seniors across the country are currently skipping meals as a result of financial abuse because their money that they use to live on is being taken from them.
That's
So,
frightening,
that
very
is frightening.
frightening. Okay, well, we will then move to the next slide, which helps us draw a distinction between the crimes that are immoral and the crimes which are illegal. They're all bad, but we do want people to understand what's criminal. Okay.
Okay. So when I was coming up with this slide, I started thinking, looking at those numbers, what you have to understand is a lot of these crimes are very difficult to prosecute or to treat as criminal activity. So when you look at the numbers we talked about earlier, you have 17 billion to exploitation and 6.7 billion to trust abuse. Both of those categories basically fall under what you would call immoral activity, which means that, it's not very nice, but they're not really breaking the law. They're basically talking the senior out of their money, or convincing them to give up their credit card or whatever voluntarily. So when you talk about law enforcement, it's very difficult when if we would have an officer respond to take that report and well, yeah, he asked and I gave it to him. It makes it difficult. So only 1/3 of a lot of this loss is actually criminal activity, where we're talking about identity theft, where they're actually taking social security numbers or things like that. So that's it's challenging for law enforcement to really attack this. So that's why education is the important part.
Yes, education does move in as being the education and prevention, because we want to help people know that it's absolutely wrong to give a credit card when somebody calls over the phone, or absolutely a mistake to give a social security number or something like that. Just like people also shouldn't loan credit cards to a family member that they know might be in a stress situation and might use it in an unfortunate way. So people have to protect all of those things, and that's what we want to encourage. So, okay, the next slide really takes us into popular scams really across the country, and then you can narrow it down and let us know which ones are the most frequent that your office hears about.
Yeah.
But,
so
all right.
So this slide, this just kind of covers the range of what you see in general. You have things like home improvement fraud or mortgage scams, funeral fraud, identity theft, internet fraud, telemarketing fraud, government scams, lottery and sweepstakes scams, and then the grandparent scam. When you start talking about identity theft, internet fraud, telemarketing fraud, the government scams, when we get into those slides, you'll see that it's hard. You can't really categorize them separately, so they kind of run together and they overlap. So it's hard to categorize something as identity theft, because internet fraud might be used to do identity theft, or vice versa. So don't think of these as categories where there's a distinction between them. Some of these actually run together, and we'll talk about that.
Yeah, there's an interplay between between some of these, right? Okay, the first topic to talk a little bit more in detail about is home improvement fraud.
Yes.
Okay.
So we'll touch on some of these. Nationwide, this is actually about the third or fourth most popular scam. Locally, we don't hear a lot of. It's not real high on the list, but and a lot of that is whether it's reported or not. But basically, what you deal with is a lot of times someone will come to your door. Sometimes after a storm. There was probably a few incidents of home improvement fraud, I would say, after last Saturday's windstorm,
yes,
blizzard, whatever
yes,
we had.
Yes.
So trees down, let me take care of that for you. I'm in the area. $300, I'll take care of everything, and they either just simply walk off with the money and don't do the job, or they do a job that's not up to standards, very high pressure usually. A lot of times you'll see them driving by in a truck and they're basically looking for their victim. So you have to treat everything a little more professionally when you're dealing with solicitors, and you have to ask for quotes, and anyone that just accepts cash payment, that's a red flag. That's one of the things they're going to do. If they don't have a legitimate business name or something like that, those are red flags you have to watch out for. If they're not willing to provide a written contract, if you have enough damage that is requiring a significant amount of cash, you probably want to get a couple estimates on it. And that's one way to avoid it, and research, obviously. And if they want full payment before they do the work, don't want to miss that, because that's a #1 red flag, because they're going to want that cash up front.
Right, and then in which case they may not do any work or do very poor
Yes.
work. So in order to make sure that people are dealing with a reputable business that's going to do this, you're absolutely right. The contracts are really important, and to make sure that a person has legitimate looking equipment and all of that type
Absolutely.
of stuff. If somebody just walks up to your door and offers to fix those shingles on that roof, or to fix whatever the siding that's falling down, beware. That's a big beware.
I used an example of storm damage with trees or whatever, but there are very public instances that are referenced of $60,000 losses, $80,000 losses, that all started with someone coming and saying, "Oh, you have a hole in your roof? Let me start there and fix it." And then that escalates into, we have to replace everything, So, and it very quickly adds up into $80,000 loss in some instances across the country. So, high pressure tactics or very scare tactics. And when I say scare tactics, I don't mean they're threatening the person, but they're threatening, you got to get this fixed right now, or you're going to have, your house is, your roof's going to collapse. So there's not a lot of time for someone to research it. They don't want something bad to happen to their house, so they just say, okay.
So the point here is really to warn our seniors not to act because someone else is insisting that it needs to be done right now.
Exactly.
They need to have a reputable person, a reputable business tell them, yes, this needs to be done now.
Even if it is an emergency situation, there are still reputable companies that you can call for after-hours support that are going to be listed in the Better Business Bureau or online, that are going to have accreditations or certifications or things listed that will show you that they're reputable.
And is it the fact that sometimes we see this behavior increase after we do have a weather event, when we have things, when trees come down, when hail hits roofs and things?
Certainly, and the reason that you can assume that is because what I've noticed, and I observe this sometimes around town, but they blend in. It's not unusual for trucks to be in the area, so they can go through neighborhoods and scope out people out in their yard and not look out of the ordinary, because there's a lot of trucks around after significant storm damage, things like that. So yes, weather can certainly dictate an increase in home improvement fraud.
Okay. Is there anything else we need to touch on with this? It's going to be harder to get that money, so it's better to prevent it, because to actually recoup any of that loss is unlikely, isn't it? I mean, most of the time the money's gone.
Especially if you're dealing with the kind of home improvement fraud where they actually do the work, however, it's done poorly.
Yes.
Because without that contract, it's going to be your word against theirs on what was promised.
You can't hold them to it, right?
What was promised or what was guaranteed. There isn't anything.
We have a caller that would like to get in on this conversation, so we're going to pause here. And caller, you're on the line. We'd like to hear your question.
Well, thank you. Hey, great show and really an important topic.
Thank you.
Quick question is, I know from working with a lot of seniors that many times the seniors have a designated individual, usually someone that they are given or they give power of attorney to. And so many times we see the person with the power of attorney sometimes take advantage of the individual And I was wondering if there's just any advice that you may have to folks out there who are considering a power of attorney, what they can do in choosing that individual to lessen the chance that someone may defraud them or steal money over a period of time.
That is an excellent question. Thank you very much for putting that to us, and we will certainly get you an answer for that. Thank you for your call.
Thank you.
Okay. I know that you're planning to talk about trust crimes coming up, but just briefly to touch on that right now, what recommendations would you have?
Yes. So, that's a very tough one because at some point in your life, if you've trusted someone to be power of attorney, all of the normal protocol that you would put into selecting a power of attorney, you've done. So it's very difficult to put a safeguard against someone you already trust. I guess as far as a recommendation would be to also have maybe legal counsel assist you in looking at that selection process, maybe talking to an attorney or an estate plan, someone who specializes in helping you with plan out your estate and things like that. Because what I'm going to talk about a little later is kind of the reverse, where you have someone who wants to take power of attorney away from a trusted source. So that's both of them are certainly problems, but the question the caller raises, it's challenging because when you select a power of attorney, you're probably selecting it because you've trusted them for a certain amount of time in your life.
Right.
So at that point, finding I guess a trusted legal advisor to assist you in the steps to take to make sure that person is doing their job and can track and make sure that person doesn't go from a trusted source and starts doing the little things. Because usually with a power of attorney, if they're going to abuse that, it's not going to be a one hit. They're going to kind of whittle away at that privilege that they have, and they're going to be, because they have access to the bank account. They're not just going to go wipe it out. They're going to whittle away at it. So maybe having another set of eyes on it would be a good way to I guess help combat that.
Right. I would also add, for the caller's benefit, and we'll probably come back to this a little bit more with the trusted, is that when a person gives another power of attorney, that doesn't mean they're completely giving up their own control. They're getting help from someone else. And so if a person who has a power of attorney has a suspicion that, they can still see their bank accounts. They can see where money is going. They're not prevented from that by having a power of attorney.
Correct.
So if there's any suspicion, act on it. Yes, an attorney would be one avenue, but if somebody feels like they can't afford that, find another trusted person to talk to, a clergyman, another relative, anybody else that's trustworthy, to review what that power of attorney is doing. So great question, caller. All right, the next topic after home improvement, we wanted to talk a little bit about homeowner and reverse mortgage scams, just to touch on that.
Yeah, so, homeowner reverse mortgage scams, this actually can kind of be a play off of the home improvement scams, and I'll tell you why. A lot of times, basically what a reverse mortgage is it's something that was put in place. If I think it's 62 years or older, they can basically take a loan out on the equity in their house and use that equity for a variety of purposes, and that equity is not due back until after later on in life, so to speak. It's a popular avenue for the home improvement people to come in. So lo and behold, some of our home improvement scamsters also specialize. They know a guy who can get them a reverse mortgage if they can't afford to pay for those renovations on their house. So, the other thing that often happens is simply the money's taken out of the equity, the loan goes through, but the senior never benefits from it. The money's just taken,
Yeah,
and they just disappear.
that's really bad.
Yeah.
Okay. On the next one is funeral fraud.
Yes. So basically, funeral fraud would deal with, you know, if you're prepaying or whatever, but there are certain rights that are guaranteed for when you're selecting funeral services and goods, and the overcharging is the big thing here, where the funeral directors are tacking on all kinds of charges and telling them they have to buy this and they're forced to buy the casket from them and just many different things. So the FTC had created the funeral rule to stop these abusive practices, and the funeral rule grants a lot of rights. You know, you have the right to choose the goods and services you want. You have to have everything must be stated clearly in writing. All prices must be laid out, and you must be given a price list ahead of time. They can't refuse or charge fees if you buy a casket from somewhere else. That's a big one. So they're not allowed to do that, and you know, there's a lot in the funeral rule. So what I would suggest on the funeral rule is, number one is to be informed. If you're looking for if you're at that point where you're wanting to start looking for those services, visit the website, the FTC website, to get the information on the funeral rule and know what your rights are there, and get everything in writing. You know, you have to have everything in writing. It's the fundamental rule that funeral directors they have to provide things in writing.
Right, right. That's a clear one, and very important for people.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, and then after that one we have the ever popular identity theft.
All right.
Unfortunately,
Yeah.
this
So
comes in many forms.
Now we're getting into the good stuff here.
Okay.
So in general, what we're going to start talking about here is involves the use of technology to initiate scams. Everybody has heard the term identity theft, and identity theft actually is a broad category that some of these other things fall in. It's usually one of two things. It's either used to gain access to a person's personal information, or it's a result of someone already having that person's information. So what I mean by that is, you're either trying to directly take the information from somebody to gain something about them, or you've bought it and you're going to use that to start a line of credit, so to speak. You know, it's kind of two different categories, but it all kind of blends together, because you have those that are putting the scams in place to try to trick you into giving up your Social Security number, or something like that. And then you have those that already have the number, that have information about you, that are actually taking out credit or whatever in your name. So you know, and we can move to the next slide if we're not there yet.
Yes, we'll move to the slide that talks, we're there, minimizing the risk.
Yes, so you know, some very easy and very common steps are out there to help combat identity theft. And one of the big ones is shredding your mail. I mean, that goes back how many years? You think in the technology age, certainly there's a lot of high-tech methods for identity theft now, but you don't want to make it easy on somebody. So we'll get into the higher tech stuff, but let's cover the basics. Don't make it easy on somebody, and just, if you get those prepay offers, don't just throw them out. You know, make sure that things are shredded. Your mail is shredded. Your statements are shredded. You don't want to give anyone the ability to easily get your information.
And many people receive lots of offers for credit and things daily in the
Yes.
mail. It's quite an industry to send this out. So, but it is worth taking the time, even if you don't have a home shredder. Most homes have a pair
Yes.
of scissors, or you can rip it with your own hand. But make sure that it couldn't be used to make a false application.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you want to destroy it in that way.
And there's a little known website that a lot of people don't necessarily know about, but it's www.optoutprescreen.com. And what that website does is, if you go there and register, you have to provide, you'll probably have to provide your Social Security number, but it is a safe website. But what it does is it actually will eliminate, or at least drastically reduce, a lot of those pre-screened credit offers and some of that mail that comes to you, that junk mail. So just opting out of it to stop it will greatly decrease your footprint of vulnerability.
Good. That's good to know. All right, computer. You want to say more
Yeah,
about?
well, some of the stuff we'll get into a little more, but we'll talk about the email and things like that. So we can move on from this slide. I'm sure the viewers can see it, but we'll move on to some of the other.
Okay. And this is now a slide that helps us with some of the steps to take if you already are a victim.
Yes. So obviously you want to contact the 3 major credit bureaus. You want to inform them, and you can even do things like put a freeze on your credit so that no additional credit in your name can be opened. You want to close accounts that have been compromised, your banks and things like that. A lot of times if you lose your credit card, they're calling you anyway and telling you, we're going to send you a new card. Change PIN numbers, change passwords, things like that. And with identity theft, call your local law enforcement agency. For Montgomery County residents, most of us, you're going to call the Regional Dispatch Center or your local agency and report it. If you suspect this involves your Social Security number, it's a little bit more serious. Local law enforcement is probably not going to be able to do a lot there. So as we discussed, you want to call the Social Security Administration and report that.
Let's give on that slide that has steps to take, it has the number for regional dispatch. And I'll just point that out for viewers. That's 225-4357. So that is an important number to have.
Yes.
And they can make referrals if your sheriff's department is not the right place to be.
Yes,
they can redirect
absolutely.
to the Social Security Administration as well. Okay, thank you. Now our next topic is telemarketing fraud.
Yes. Okay, so there's not a lot to say about this that most people probably don't know because everybody deals with it on a regular basis. You get called and people want anything and everything. They want to sell you something. They want information from you. You've won prizes. You've won the lottery. You've won a sweepstakes, or they're a charity. So all of that basically constitutes what they call telemarketing fraud. So there's, as far as defining what telemarketing fraud is, there's not a lot to say about it that hasn't been experienced by most viewers that probably are listening.
Well, I
or
do
watching.
think it is important to say something that's very, very simple. If you don't want it, you don't have to talk to them. Some of the tapes I have heard of people who've become victims to this, the problem is they just are not able to hang up the phone.
Yeah.
And while it may appear rude, if somebody's trying to scam you, you need to hang up the phone. Or
Yeah.
if you feel uncomfortable with it, you need to get out of that conversation. Okay.
So, one of the more popular things that and we can move, I'm
Before
sorry.
you start on that, we have yet another caller
okay.
who has a question. Hello, thank you for calling the program. You're on the air.
Thank you for taking my call. This is such an important program, such a persistent and terrible crime that you're dealing with people preying upon the elderly. And in my own neighborhood, in my own family, I've had experience with this. My question is, two of the worst cases I have known of defrauding of the elderly have been by, one was a political organization that I think succeeded in getting tens of thousands of dollars from a neighbor lady across the street. Finally, she called me and asked for my help, but it was too late. The money was all gone, and they had been very aggressive in getting at her money with frightening pieces of mail that were sent to her, conspiracy theories. And the other case, which may have even been worse, was a religious professional that succeeded in getting tens of thousands of dollars from an aunt of mine by basically moving into her home with her. And in that case, it took the city attorney to get rid of that person. But what can be done in these cases? And is there, can your office be contacted? These are cases that are not illegal, I don't suppose, but they're predatory. Sorry for a long question, and I'll take my answer after I say goodbye.
Well, thank you. It's a good question, and that is one of the challenges we're dealing with. Thank you for your call.
Thank you.
Goodbye. Yes, these are the very tough ones.
Yeah.
The one he talked about, it was mail, threatening mail coming in that if you don't give to us, this is going to happen to our world, okay? And, you know, predatory, clearly. And then the other that he was talking about, I think you heard, was somebody who maneuvered themselves into a position of trust that they were able to end. So maybe we can separate those a little bit.
Yeah.
If something's coming through the mail, there would be one response. And if somebody's moving in on somebody else, that would be different.
As far as the mail, the U.S. Postal Service actually, I believe it's they process 1,000 complaints a year or more for fraudulent mail offers. So they can actually be contacted directly to be told that I'm getting persistent mail from a source that you know I don't trust, or they're threatening me or whatever. So the bottom line is use the resources. Contact people. If you, the big thing is, you can certainly start with law enforcement. They're going to they're going to look at it. It's not always easy to prosecute, but they can certainly probably push it to the right area, or at least let you know. There's not a lot we can do here if it is something that is considered immoral and not illegal. It does become a challenge.
Well, if someone does receive aggressive, predatory mail like that, and if they maybe choose to give once because they want to, obviously they're giving it up, they're doing it of their own free will, and then more comes, I would encourage our viewers that if you know somebody that's happening to, get involved to try to help them, or if you are the victim of that kind of stuff, speak up to somebody that you know and trust that you want this to be stopped, because it can be stopped. You can stop the mail that's coming into your house like that. So people need to know that the best way to prevent it is to take some kind of action, because as you've pointed out, once it's happened, it's difficult to prosecute.
Yep.
So. And then the moving in, are we going to hit that up? Are we going to come to that one later?
We'll come to that a little
all right,
later.
Viewer,
We'll
we will get to your answer on that one a little bit later. Are we done with telemarketing?
I think we're on. I wanted to talk a little bit about do not call.
Okay, the do not call registry under telemarketing.
Just some things that people may not know about the do not call registry.
Good.
It can take 30 days for your number to show up on the list after you register your number. Once you register your number, political organizations, charities, and survey takers are still permitted to call.
Okay.
They are exempt from the do not call. Businesses that you've made previous purchases from or have made a payment to are also permitted to call your number with offers.
Because they already have a relationship
Yes.
with you. Okay.
And then some offers that you sign up for, if you sign up for like free products or sweepstakes, they have that real little fine print that's probably going to give them written permission to call you.
But again, you don't have to talk to
Right,
them.
right.
And if you have a message, you don't even have to pick up the phone.
Yes. And then two other quick notes here. Despite what most Facebook, your Facebook friends will tell you, I know that I see this shared out quite often, where you get a shared post on your Facebook page, and it'll say, beware, the national cell phone database is getting ready to be released to the public. Your cell phone number is going to be in the hands of millions of marketers, and it's not true. You don't even have to register your cell phones. Most people still do, but technically cell phones are already covered, and it's illegal to call a cell phone. Now, why does everybody still get cell phone calls? Because most people don't respect the do not call registry list, and that's because of the advent of throwaway phones and disposable phone numbers. There's very little risk that somebody's going to get tracked down.
Right, exactly. Okay, well, thank you for that. Now we have some tips for avoiding the telemarketing fraud.
Yeah, and we'll move through this a little bit, but
Okay.
Still place your phone number on the do not call registry.
And even particularly if you have a landline. If you're
Yes,
using a
landline,
landline,
yes.
especially so. Okay.
Ask that offers be put in writing if you are interested, and if you're not, just hang up. Don't impulse. No impulse decisions on telemarketing. Research it. If that deal's a once in a lifetime deal, then so be it. Let it go. Always take the time to research something. That's probably the key steps to avoid it.
That's great. And of course, never to invite anybody into your home, and certainly not to wire money to people.
Yes.
That's another risky thing.
Yes.
All right.
So internet fraud, which is kind of another avenue for identity theft. Cyberspace is the newest area being used and certainly the most dangerous. You have websites, you have email. All of these are used to gain something, entry into someone's personal information. You have free credit report offers all the time. You have
And there is one real one. You want to?
Yes, we'll talk about that.
Okay, good. We'll come back to that.
Yes, work at home, all these scams. And then the one that we really want to talk about, there's actually two, but phishing. And I don't mean fishing with a fishing pole, but phishing is a term that basically it revolves around like you're trying to dupe somebody out of information about themselves. So the most common form of phishing comes in an email, to where you get a very vague email and it says your account needs to be verified. Please click here to verify your information. And that little blue is highlighted as a clickable link. Well, that little blue highlight can be made to point anywhere. And oftentimes it'll go to a website that looks just like maybe your financial institute or Facebook, and you'll put your information in, but you're nowhere near the real website. So you just gave them your username and password. So it's very, very, very dangerous.
Never respond to that.
Never click directly through an unsolicited email.
If your bank needs to verify information, they're not going to do it that way. That's not
100%
it's
guaranteed.
not a
They are
banking
not-
practice.
They are not going to guarantee. So,
Yeah.
and on the next slide, I'll show you some of those examples.
Okay.
But on the upper left, you see the SunTrust. This was like a bank customer, and they have a link there, and that link may look like it's supposed to go to SunTrust Bank, and it more than likely goes to some website that appears to be just like SunTrust Bank, but it's not. They're looking for information. And the key word is, it may be hard to read for our viewers on the screen, but the key thing to understand is a lot of times the sentences will be very poorly written in a phishing email, because oftentimes they're being written by, they come from a foreign location. So the English doesn't translate for them well onto their little form. So they'll have missing words like the and might be missing, and things like that, or things will be misspelled or just improperly written. So those are all indicators that you've gotten a fraudulent email. So never click on that link. If you really want to check on it, you need to go to that website direct. In other words, go up in the browser, put your cursor up there, and type www.suntrust.com. Don't click the link to get there. Then log in, and if you have a problem with your account, there's going to be a message in your account. You're going to have like an inbox or something like that, or call them.
Yeah.
Call them and say, hey,
is this for real?
Is this for real?
Right, right.
The other thing is your computer is infected. It looks like a big warning label that something horrible is wrong with your computer,
Right.
and it has a number to call. That's actually just a website, and a lot of times they'll design it to make it look like your actual computer screen. Like when you click on My Computer and you see all your drives and all that, they make the website look like that. And then you call that number and they want $75 to start. Then they get in and they say that they're going to fix the virus, and it's a lot worse than it was, so you could be out $300 or $400. Very popular and very common in this area. I have neighbors left and right that have fallen for this scam all the time.
Okay, and so if a person does get a warning about their computer being infected, it's not going to get solved over the internet by going to a site here. It needs to be solved by taking your computer to a reputable business.
Have someone check it out.
Yes, have someone else look at this, and don't feel stupid in the process, because you don't want to be giving lots of money away here. So thank you.
They call that the Microsoft scam. So.
The Microsoft scam. Okay, beware.
So, how to avoid it. We talked about it. Don't click on pop-ups. Don't open and respond to unsolicited emails. Open attachments. Attachments are big. They have this thing called ransomware now. Probably the scariest form of malware or a virus, where people probably open an attachment in an email, and all of their files end up what they call encrypted or scrambled, and they have like 72 hours to pay them, or all their files will be gone for forever. You're talking about pictures, Word documents. Everything on the computer usually gets encrypted. Usually that comes from opening attachments in an email. So you have to be careful. Don't be trustworthy that all email is safe. The majority of email is actually not. Email is actually probably the most common avenue for initiating some sort of attack or scam.
Right. So probably not to open any attachments from people that you don't know.
Right, and even sometimes from people that you do know, because a lot of times they'll be forwarding something that,
is bad.
Yeah, so I don't want to paint doom and gloom on your computer,
but we want people to know what to
yeah,
prevent. That's right, and with the computer, always ask if you've got that.
Yeah.
All right.
So we can, on time here, what I want to touch on is another thing that's common in our area, and that's the FBI, the IRS scam.
Okay.
When we talk about phony government scams, I want to talk about it. This is very common in our area, and we've fielded a lot of complaints for this. People are calling saying they're from the IRS. You have an outstanding tax debt that you owe, and you've been referred to the local law enforcement, and you have to stay. They will tell you have to stay on the call with me. You have to drive to Walmart or Kroger. You have to get a money card, and give me that number, and it's usually $2,000 or $3,000 or whatever, and people left and right are falling victim to it. I think people are getting as we put out public like warnings on social media. And
Right.
the news has covered it quite a bit.
Right.
It is dropping off, so people are aware, but it is a very common, over the last couple years, it's been very common. And especially at this time of year, that's why I wanted to touch on it.
Okay, well, thank you. And if somebody does get that call, should they just hang up? The IRS is not going to call you. They're going to send you
Absolutely.
a bill
Yes.
in the mail.
Yes.
And it's going to have official
Yes.
letterhead and stationery. The
Yes.
IRS is not collecting by calling you at home.
Yes.
That's not their practice.
My wife actually got the call, and she said, well, my husband knows, because he said the sheriff is coming to arrest you.
Oh,
so
in
she
your
said, well, my
case.
husband knows the sheriff, so I'll let him handle it, and then they hung up on her.
Okay.
So, yes, feel free to use that one, but it's usually pretty effective to just tell them, just call their bluff.
Yes.
And don't fall for it.
Okay. Good advice. Thank you.
So, we'll touch on lottery and sweepstakes just a little bit. Obviously, what I want to say here in the interest of time is, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. If you've won the lottery or you've won a sweepstakes, don't wire money to someone to pay for the taxes ahead of time in the expectation that they're suddenly going to send you $25,000 back after you sent them $2,500. It simply is not going to happen. So it's not something we have to spend a lot of time on. It's very obvious how to avoid.
You never pay to get a
Yes,
prize. Never pay.
That's the number one MO for the lottery and sweepstakes is you have to wire money to cover the taxes or the processing fees. That money has to be wired ahead of time before you get your big payout.
And again, our lottery does not work that way.
Correct.
It's not. It's
absolutely.
never going to do that. So you
Yes.
know that's a scam.
Yes.
All right. In the interest of time, I think we do need to talk a little bit about the trusted person scams,
Yes.
and then we want to get our numbers up there. So
Yes.
we'll leave off the slides for right now and just let you talk about the trusted person scams. These are difficult.
Okay. So yes. So there's kind of two things we want to touch here. There is an actual term called the grandparent scam, and what that one usually involves is someone calling, and they'll start phishing. There's that word again, phishing for information. And what I mean is they're going to throw out vague terminology to you, like, do you have a grandson? Yes. And you're going to hand over all the information they need. They're going to basically talk you out of the name and the sex of your grandchild.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to know it's a girl, and her name is Riley. And they're going to say they've been arrested or they've been in an accident, and we need you to wire money or give us a credit card so that we can process this and get them out. Something along the lines of that. Now that is the traditional grandparent scam.
Right.
So what I want to also touch on is a little more serious, and that is when you start dealing with trusted persons. And the grandparent scam is usually a stranger. They're just cold calling and hoping they find the right person who's vulnerable to the questions, and they're going to give up the answers enough to give over their credit card.
And again, if a grandchild is in jail or in the hospital, this is not the way it's going to work.
Absolutely.
They're not going to be demanding payment for that.
Yeah.
Okay, we are running very short on
Yes.
time, so
So-
let's wrap up with the trusted person.
So
and we'll
the
get our
trusted
numbers
person
up.
scam, what we want to talk about here is that you have someone, a trusted caretaker, or a new friend. Let's call it a new friend, and they begin to infiltrate into the senior's financial affairs. And there's some very common steps that are taken. And typically, what you'll see is they'll find a common interest to form a bond. So whether it be religion or politics or sports or history, they'll find that common interest with the senior that they're engaging, and what you're going to start to see then over a period of time is they're going to start isolating that person from loved ones. They're going to start creating doubt in their mind of the loyalty of your family. Where's your family been for you all these years? You trust this person with your affairs. You actually trust they're going to start throwing these, just constantly feeding them with this terminology. You trust them with your power of attorney, and then the next step is they've basically talked the person into handing over power of attorney, and they've basically turned them against everyone that matters for the past 50 years of that person's life. Everyone that's mattered to that person they've basically isolated them away from them, and now they have all the power.
Right. This is more the case that our second caller had
Yes.
with that. So family members that find or see this kind of thing happen, where a senior may have a new best friend that is working on destroying relationships. I mean, this is a very serious kind of con game that's going on that the senior's falling victim to.
Yes.
So do you have suggestions for what family members do to intervene at that point?
Well,
Or when they see it happening? As we've said before, prevention is major.
certainly I would like to say to stay close and to have other family members talking to the person and paying attention to what's going on. But I've seen that firsthand, that philosophy backfire as well. Yeah. So it's very challenging to sit here and offer up any kind of solid advice other than it's a very real danger, and it's scary, and you have to try to stay involved in that person's life. And again, education. If perhaps they're made aware of some of these things ahead of time, that will help avoid that happening.
Right. If a new friend starts asking for money or presents financial difficulties in their life that they want help with, then that's a red flag. That's the beginning of more and more. Okay. So our time is really close. I'd like for our slide to be put up with the resources, please, so that people can see the numbers to call if they have questions, and I'll give you just a minute for closing remarks. Thank you.
Basically, the bottom line I would like to stress here is if someone's been a victim of a scam, odds are they're not going to get the money back. You'll never see that money again. So the single number one thing we have to do is educate against the scams that are out there. Knowledge after the fact often involves hurting someone's pride. They don't want to admit that they've been a victim, so they have to be educated ahead of time to help it not happen at all, rather than trying to combat it after the fact. Because law enforcement is not always successful. There's a lot of this is overseas. Or federal. It's hard to track down people and prosecute. So education.
Prevention. If a person feels pressured on any of these, then speak out, ask somebody you like, or call my office, or call the sheriff's office, call somebody to get some help. Okay, thank you very much. I really appreciate the information you've presented tonight. I think it's a wonderful step to helping people protect themselves and protect the ones they love. So thank you for the information, and I'd like to thank the viewers and our callers this evening. Good night.